Okay, we are going to be doing a subtraction review today. And we're going to be looking at some strategies for subtracting to make it a little bit easier. Alright, so first of all, we're going to look at something called subtraction in parts. Oops. Alright, so let's say we are looking at the problem 35 minus 7. Alright, if you remember, whenever we're subtracting, subtraction means to take away. So 35 minus 7 means 35 take away 7. So one way to make this a little bit easier if you're trying to do this in your mind is to start with 35 and let's take away 5 because that's easy to do in our heads, and then take away 2. So if you take away 5 and then take away 2, that's the same as taking away 7, isn't it? But doing this problem may be a little bit easier in your head to think about. So 35 take away 5 is 30, and then take away 2 or subtract 2 is going to give you 28. Alright, so this is called subtracting in parts because you're taking away or subtracting in smaller parts than your original number. Okay, so when we're subtracting in parts, we usually try to pick a number to subtract that's easy. Like if we have 35, we take away 5 because that brings us down to 30, and then we take away the rest and get our final answer. Okay, so let's see if we can do another example. Let's say we were doing 47 minus 12. Okay. So if we wanted to do this in parts, we could say we have 47. Let's take away 7. Alright, because 7 is going to be an easy number to subtract from 47. And then we have to take away the rest, which is 5 more, because 7 and 5 equals 12. So in other words, doing this is the same as taking away 12. We're just doing it in parts. Alright, so 47 minus 7 is 40, and then you take away the 5, and that gives you 35. Alright, so subtracting in parts is one strategy or one technique that helps with subtraction. Now, another thing that you can do is called using a helping problem. Alright, so let's see what that is about. Let's say we were doing 35 minus 7, that same problem that we did a minute ago. And I want to remind you, whenever you're subtracting 35 minus 7, if you do it the traditional way that we normally do it, when we try to subtract 5 minus 7 here, we can't do that because we need to borrow. There's not 5 minus 7, you can't take 7 away from 5. So what we do usually is we come over here to the 3 and we borrow 1, so that leaves 2, and we bring that 1 that we borrowed over, and it's actually a 10 that we're borrowing, so when we add that to 5 we get 15. Now, so 15 minus 7 is 8, and then we bring down the 2. Alright, so we know the answer is 28, so how could we use this method here to do this problem over here without having to write all this out? Okay. Now there's nothing wrong with writing all this out, but sometimes we want to be able to do things in our head if we don't have a piece of paper and pencil or something like that. So what we want to think about when we're doing 35 minus 7 is that we want to use a helping problem. And the helping problem is 15 minus 7. Now, why is this a helping problem? Well, when we're doing the subtraction here and we had to borrow, notice we had a 15 up here that we ended up using in the subtraction. Okay? And when we used that 15, it made the tens digit come down by 1. So instead of a 3, we had a 2 there. Alright, so if we know 15 minus 7 is equal to 8, going back to this problem, when we have 35 minus 7, if we use the helping problem, which is 15 minus 7, and we get 8, and then we understand that the tens digit is going to be reduced by 1, so it becomes a 2, we can find that answer pretty quickly just using this method. So let's look at a couple more of those so we can make sure we understand how to do that. Alright, let's say that we were doing 65 minus 7. Alright, now the helping problem is still going to be 15 minus 7. Okay, which is 8. And the way I know that the helping problem is 15 minus 7 is I've got this 5 here and this 7. And I know in my mind that I'm going to have to borrow and that the 5 is going to become a 15. Okay? So in this problem, 65 minus 7, I know that my 1's digit is going to be 8. I use the helping problem, 15 minus 7, to tell me that. And then remember now, your tens digit is going to be reduced by 1. So instead of a 6, it's going to become a 5. So my answer is 58. Okay? Let's try one more. How about if we were doing 95 minus 7? Alright, the helping problem is still 15 minus 7, which is 8. Okay, and I know that because of this 5 and this 7. Alright, so I know my answer is going to have an 8 in it. And then the tens digit of my answer is 1 less than my 9. So that's going to be an 8. So my answer is 88. Okay, so if you understand that and you like that, you can use that sometimes when you're doing some subtraction problems. Let's do one more that's a little different than those, because those were all kind of the same. They were related problems. So let's say we were doing 43 minus, let's say 9. Okay? Alright, so what is my helping problem here? Well, my helping problem is going to be, I've got a 3 here, so this is actually going to be 13 minus 9. Alright? You have to think about if you were to borrow, what you would actually get. Alright, and we know that's 4. So, my answer then to this problem is going to have a 4 in it, and then this number comes down by 1, so it becomes a 3. Alright, it gets reduced to 3. So, answer is 34. Alright, so try to use that in some of your problems, and the more you use that, the easier it will get. Alright, now we have another technique we can use, and we did this in addition in the last couple of days, so I want to show you how you can use it with subtraction. Let's say you were subtracting 705 minus 99. Well, that's kind of hard to think about in your head because those are big numbers and everything, so that would be one that you would probably want to write down and work out normally, but you can use a technique to make this one easier to do mentally. So instead of 705 minus 99, what if we did 705 minus 100? That's a pretty easy problem to think about. And then, all right, now when we take away 100, we're taking away one too many. We were supposed to be taking away 99. But we're going to take, if we take away 100, we took away one too many. So what we need to do is add 1 back in to make it come out right. All right. So what is 705 minus 100? That's 605. And then if you add your 1 back in, you get 606. And that should be the answer to this problem. Okay. So taking away 99 is the same as taking away 100 and then adding 1 back in. Okay, but this one is a little easier to think about, so that's why we want to use that if we can. All right, let's look at another example. Let's say we're doing 140 minus 88. All right. Now, again, that's kind of hard to think about in your head. So what if we did 140 minus 90? That might be a little easier. But if we take away 90, we're taking away too many. So we have to add back in, we have to add 2 back in. Alright? So in other words, taking away 88 is the same as taking away 90 and then adding 2 back in. Alright, so let's do this problem. 140 minus 90 is 50. And then if you add 2, you get 52. Alright? So the answer to this problem is then 52. Okay? So we are using a number, we're subtracting a number that is a little easier to subtract. Instead of subtracting 88, we subtract 90. And then we add 2 back in to adjust for that so that we get the correct answer. And this is just another strategy for subtracting. Okay, now one more strategy that's kind of neat, that is a way to do a subtraction problem, is, let's say we were subtracting 93 minus 28. And we're going to use this technique called adding up. And this is a really good technique to know, because you can use this technique also when you're making change for somebody. Let's say somebody gave you some money and you need to give them their change back. This is a really neat technique for doing that, which we'll talk about later. But let's talk about how we do this. Alright, whenever we're subtracting, we are finding the difference between two numbers. So if we're finding the difference between 93 and 28, if you had a number line and 28 was here and 93 was here, your answer to that would actually be the distance between 28 and 93. Alright? So if you started at 28 and you walked along this pathway, up to 93, how far would you have to go? And that would be the difference between 93 and 28. Okay? So what we do when we do this adding up is we start at 28 and we say, let me erase this for a second. Alright, go back. So, oops. Okay. We start at 28 here, and we do a series of jumps. So first of all, we start at 28 and we say, okay, I'm going to go to 30 because that's an easy thing to figure out. That's a jump of 2. And then I'm going to go to 90 because that's another easy one to figure out. That's 60. And then to 93, that's another jump of 3. So what is my total there? Well, 2 plus 60 is 62 plus 3 is 65. So I have a total of 65 from here to here. And that actually is my answer to my problem. Alright, so that's called adding up. And the reason it's called adding up is you start at the lowest number, which is 28, and you're adding up to your larger number. Okay, you're doing that in little pieces until you get there. And you choose the pieces that are easiest for you to think about. Alright, so let's look at another example. Let's say we're doing 420 minus 160. And we want to use this technique of adding up. Alright, so we're going to start at 160. And you don't have to draw the number line. You don't even have to write anything down if you can do this in your head. But it's okay to write things down. Alright, so we're starting at 160. And we want to try to get to 420. So in our minds we think, okay, 160. I could add 40. That would make this, that's an easy number to add. That'll get me to 200. And then when we add 200 more, that'll get me to 400. And then I would need to add 20. And that would get me to 420. Now, what did I have to add altogether to get from 160 to 420? Well, I had to add 40 plus 200 plus 20, which is a total of 260. So that is the answer to my problem. Okay? So you want to think about this kind of in steps. In this problem, we started at 160, and the reason I added 40 was that I was trying to get to the next 100. So 160 going up to 200, I had to add 40. So at that point, I was at 200 when I add these two together. And then I'm still, this is my goal. And so I say, okay, what number can I add that's an easy number to add to get me up to the next level? And so I'm trying to get up to 400 and something, so that's why I added 200. That gets me up to 400 now. Alright, and then I had to add the 20 more, of course, to get to 420. Alright, so practice doing that with some of the problems also. That's an easy way to subtract. And again, it's called adding up, because you're starting at the bottom, the lowest number, and you are adding up to the larger number. Okay? Alright, last thing here. We're going to look at a series of problems. Let's say we're starting at 350, and we want to subtract 50. Alright, what do we get if we take 350 minus 50? Well, we get 300, don't we? Alright, now let's say we subtract 50 again. We get 250, and then if we subtract 50 again, we get 200, and then if we subtract 50 again, we get 150, and if we subtract 50 again, we get 100, and then if we subtract 50 again, we get 50. Okay? So that's just a series of subtractions, subtracting 50 each time. So look at your answers here that you're getting, and you can see a pattern there. And so what I want to ask you is, when you look at those numbers, which table do you think of? In other words, this kind of looks like the table of what? So, what am I talking about? Well, let's look at the numbers here. I see a 5, even though that's a 50. I'm kind of zeroing in on these numbers. Alright, so what table, mathematical table, has those numbers? Well, isn't that the table of 5? Because 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20, 5 times 5 is 25, 5 times 6 is 30, 5 times 7 is 35. Okay, so they just want you to notice here, and you'll have a couple of problems like this in your homework, that the answers here correspond to the table of 5. Alright, and so they'll ask you some questions like that when you're doing your homework. Alright, so on your last page of homework, let me write down what your homework is first. Your homework is going to be on page 15 and 16. And on that last page, there's going to be something called a repeated subtraction game. And if you want to, you can try that game. You'll need to make some cards with some different numbers on them, and then you could try that game maybe with a friend or something like that. You know, you don't have to do that for tonight for homework, but that's just something fun you can do to practice your subtraction. So, have a good day, and I will see you next time.